Somewhat surprisingly, it was a former mayor of the City of London who first coined the phrase the 3 R's. Some 200 years ago, Sir William Curtis, while addressing a dinner at the Board of Education, proposed a toast to reading, writing and arithmetic. Today they're still seen as vital to success. However, in the 2008 national test, the great majority of 11-year-olds reached the expected levels in reading, writing and maths. But that still left a substantial minority who did not. So this has prompted the government to switch from relying just on the national strategies and instead funding specific early intervention projects. So we now have 3 of them: Every Child a Reader, Every Child a Writer and Every Child Counts. Let's start with Every Child a Reader.
What is it?
St Andrew's School in North London. This school runs the Every Child a Reader initiative. Tyrese is one of 4 Year 1 pupils who come out of class each day to work with Miranda Cullen, the reading recovery teacher.
Excellent. Remember to use your finger. The reading recovery lesson begins where the child reads to me familiar text. So those are books that he's read before that he's familiar and confident with. He'll read those to me and then I will praise him on strategies that he's used to decode the book and to read it back to me.
When I introduced reading recovery into St Andrews, the results were very below average, and even when we compared ourselves to similar schools, we just really weren't hitting any of the standards that we needed to meet. And one of the areas clearly that we needed a lot of work around was reading. And unfortunately it was more like the whole cohort. And so I knew I needed to look at a package that could have impact with the lowest attaining children, but could also ripple to the rest of the class because it's just got such good high quality intervention material that can be used for the whole class.
How did you know that that then said at?
Because I saw A.
You looked at the sound, the at sound. Good boy, well done. We follow that on where I take a running record of the book that was introduced in the lesson previously.
Tom said...
The running record is where we look at the strategies that he's using to decode the book and to read the book back to us. And that also gives us information of what we need to do to move the child on.
When I introduced reading recovery, it immediately sent a sort of buzz through the school because it was a very intense programme of one-to-one support for the children, and they are the lowest attaining children. And those children went through, when they were in Year 1, Year 2 actually hit national averages, which they were never predicted to hit.
Okay, Tyrese is... Basically, he'll write the story and it's all about the hearing and the recording of sounds, where we use these sound boxes where he'll put the sounds that he can hear and he'll put them into the right boxes to spell the word. And then he'll write the story, check the story, and then we do what's called reconstructing the cut-up story. He
found
his book bag.
Full stop.
Okay, I'll write the story out, I cut each word, and then he's making the story again, so he's having to think about which word goes where. If there's 3 words in there, there was 3 words that all began with the same sound, but he managed to look at the whole word, he's decoding, he's thinking about different strategies of putting the story back into the correct order. And it's things like full stops, finger spaces, capital letters, all those things that are part of writing, but that some children struggle with.
The idea of early intervention is very well accepted, that the earlier you intervene, the less they've got to catch up, the quicker they can catch up, the less damage is done to their feeling of self-worth and their motivation to learn.
And that's a really good attempt.
A reading recovery teacher operates early intervention called Reading Recovery in the school as part of the Every Child a Reader initiative. So it's I suppose you could say it's at the heart of, but it's obviously only appropriate and sensible to give to those children with the highest need.
Every Child a Reader is targeted at 5 and 6-year-olds who are in the bottom 5% of achievers. It's one-to-one teaching for half an hour each day for 12 to 20 weeks. By 2011, 30,000 children in 3,000 schools and 150 local authorities will receive extra support each year. That's 1,800 specially trained teachers.
Knowing how to read is a right in our society, and we cannot have children who haven't learnt to read. So actually our normal distribution does not include that tale of children for whom illiteracy is the rest of their journey through life.
Results from the 3-year pilot of Every Child a Reader showed on average pupils boosted their reading age by nearly 2 years in 4 or 5 months. They made progress at well over 4 times the normal rate.
Every Child a Reader is a catchy name for an initiative, and it sums up the right of every child to become a reader. But it's also a little unfortunate in the sense it's as much about writing as it is about reading. It's about literacy, really.
Within literacy, there have been improvements in reading standards, but writing remains a problem. In 2008, just 68% of 11-year-olds reached the expected levels in writing, and that figure has remained almost static over the last few years. What's more, boys remain 14% behind girls. Every Child a Writer targets 7 and 8-year-olds for 10 hours over 10 weeks, aiming for level 3 at the end of year 4. By 2011, it will cover over 45,000 children in up to 9,000 schools and 150 local authorities.
Writing standards, that's a very hard thing to judge because we do not have the same kind of information on writing as we do on reading and on mathematics. And we can go back to tests in the 1950s and look at how children were reading. I can't point to similar things in writing. I can read Shakespeare, but I can't write Shakespeare. Am I out of sync in that? Of course I can read material which is far harder than any material which I could write. So a comparison to say that children should be writing at the level they can read is just a nonsense.
Standards in reading have risen over the past few years. Standards in writing are still relatively low. And it's because writing is so much more of a complex activity than reading. The skills required to write effectively include the ability to order your thoughts. Therefore, you need to be a good speaker, you need to be able to communicate effectively.
In primary school, with literacy, it tends to be that it's the class teacher who teaches literacy. But do you think that with this approach, you actually really need specialist teachers?
Those specialist skills are required. The reading recovery skills are not just about the teaching of reading, they're actually about addressing the child's specific needs. And it may be that actually the teacher who is the reading recovery teacher is very well suited to actually supporting numeracy interventions as well as writing interventions, because it's about that child-centred approach and understanding the needs and requirements of that child at that point.
Reading and writing are not the only areas of intervention. There's also a project which focuses on numeracy called Every Child Counts. It's being piloted in a number of schools, including this one in South London.
You can choose any fish you want, all right? What number's that you're choosing?
18.
18. If you've got 18, how much more do you need to make 20? 2 more. Good boy, well done.
We were using the fish to make number bonds to 20. So if you had 10 on one side, how much more would you need to make 20? And on the other side it's 10.
How much more do you need to make 20 if you've got 15?
5.
Good boy.
Now we have a very highly qualified maths professional, maths specialist, who's come into our school. We had some issues with mathematics across the school anyway, and she's become part of our mathematics improvement team. And so she's contributing to that. She's also done several staff meetings with the staff, and she's training support staff. So she's a very important part of our school family now.
Add another 10.
33,
Good.
43, 53, 63.
He's quite good at counting tens, so I wanted to see if he can count on in tens, starting from a different number.
Most of our other strategies and interventions have been much later on in the children's lives, often when they're approaching their Key Stage 2 SATs. This intervention is particularly early and is targeting some of our most needy children at a very early stage in their school career. It's interesting to see that such children so far have been making massive progress.
Do your fingers. 20, 30.
80.
How did you work that out so quickly?
Because if you have 80 and then added more, 2 more 10s in it makes
You turned it round. Good boy, well done.
It's developing his confidence with it and developing his own skills within himself that he can count on by using his head, the number in the head, and counting on with his fingers.
One thing we do have to remember though is that those young children now need to be tracked throughout the school to make sure that their progress continues. And we also need to make sure that when they go back into the classroom, the teacher is aware that they will have changed and doesn't continue to put them in the bottom group, so it actually puts them in a more suitable group and continues to pull their strengths out.
Every Child Counts targets 6-year-old pupils in the bottom 5% of achievers. It offers one-to-one teaching for half an hour a day for 12 weeks. By 2011, it will cover 30,000 children in 1,900 schools and 105 local authorities. That's 1,600 specially trained teachers.
My bestest thing when I'm with Miss Blake, when we have to count in fives with the instruments. The robots, we was counting in tens. We have to make a number line with glitter and use it to count. And the robot eats some numbers.
He understands numbers more fully. He's more clear on different strategies on how to add, take away, partition, odd and even numbers, all the things that he needs to know. He's a lot more confident and he'll have a go at it, whereas before the teaching assistant told me that he'd be more afraid or more reluctant to even ask questions.
You can no longer accept that there will be 5 or 6% of children who don't learn to read or do basic maths. We've proved that that doesn't have to happen and that those children can not only catch up with their peers but often do better than them. The firm of accountants KPMG did a piece of work to look at the cost of not providing this early intervention. Not being able to either read or count affects your life chances. There's such a high risk of health problems, depression, unemployment, involvement in crime. There's a direct link between negative life chances. So if you cost what the public purse has to spend on each child who doesn't get effective early intervention, it's up to £60,000 per child over their lifetime. Now these programmes cost around £2,600.
One major lesson that we have picked up, and I think the government has picked up to be fair, is that when policies are introduced, they should be based on solid evidence. We shouldn't try to second guess what's going to work in the classroom. So really the only way with policy is to try out things in a controlled way so that you really get good evidence for what works, that you learn for what didn't work and how to improve it, and then you roll it out and then you continue to monitor how it's working over time.
The school secretary, Ed Bull, says he wants 90% of 11-year-olds to reach the expected levels in maths and English. That will require these intervention strategies to work. So far, pupils involved in the pilot schemes have shown good progress. The big question is whether that will be maintained once they're rolled out nationally.